Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Center, center. Mic two, mic two.
But no, I
I'm worried about your mom.
Thank you. Appreciate it. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Good.
Mic four. Testing mic four. Testing.
Good afternoon and welcome to the July 26th meeting of the BAR Large Public Meeting Room at 2 George Street. My name is John Robinson. I'm the chair for this evening. The other board members present with me are Jay White, who will be recusing on agenda item number 3, 74 President Street presentation, James Metters, Seton Brown, Eddie Bello, who will sit as the alternate for item 2, 155 Meeting Street, and number 3, 74 President Street. Steve Ramos, alternate for item 3, 74 President Street, and item number 4, 657 King Street. I have a little game of musical chairs. City staff present this evening are Tori Parrish, the city architect, Lawrence Courtney, the staff architect, and Travis Galley, preservation planner. Applicants have been required to submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Staff will control the slide presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the required deadline in accordance with submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask the staff to advance to the next slide during the presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name when speaking.
We are live, but we are having some technical difficulties which are resulting in a huge lag time in between what's going on here and what's going on back there. So at this rate, it would take us all night and into the morning to get through this presentation.
Well, so I think, Lawrence, since we are live, what I will do, unless anyone strongly objects, is we'll keep running through the protocol. We'll get our minutes approved. We'll talk about the mock-up panel, which I don't think has a slide presentation, and we'll see if we've changed the staff quote. Is that okay?
I think we got out-of-town applicants, we're just sensitive to.
Quick question, is this related to live streaming or is this an in-house technical issue?
Upgrades.
We are fundamentally rebuilding the AV in this room, and we apparently aren't quite there yet.
Okay.
I think we need to.
As a point, Mr. Chairman, to
present.
the image overview and the full agenda is available on the agenda center of the City of Charleston's website. So if people wanted to follow along, then everything is available there.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there, and we have to balance the rights of these applicants versus the fact that those members of the public can't see the presentation, and I don't expect them to bring their own laptop in order to see it. Let me resume running through the sheet. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the City of Charleston Public Meeting channel on YouTube. Your appearance here and participation this evening is your consent to have been recorded for all of perpetuity. The order of the meeting will be as follows. There will first be an introduction and overview by city staff to the board and for the benefit of the public. This is followed by the applicant's presentation, which is limited to 10 minutes unless extended at the request of the applicant by the chair. This includes any questions of the applicant by board or staff. Any and all presenters need to clearly state their affiliation with any given project, be they the owner, developer, architect, designer, consultant. They should speak during this portion rather than in the following public comment portion. The applicant's presentation is followed by the public comment period. All applications are part of the public meeting format. Written public comments were due noon yesterday. Those comments have been disseminated to the board if provided and will not be read into the record unless the chair determines it necessary at the request of a board member. Written comments have been considered, but will not be read into the record. Any member of the public who wishes to be heard in person tonight on an agenda item is requested to approach the podium. There's a 2-minute time limit for those remarks unless it's extended by the chair. The applicant does not respond to any comments made by members of the public at the time of public comment. Public comment period is followed by city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant is then allowed a response or clarification to either public comments and or the city staff comments and recommendations. This response time has a 5-minute limit unless extended by the chair. The applicant does not have to use the response period if they do not feel it is necessary. The applicant response period is followed in turn by board discussion and a vote on any agenda item. At this point, the applicant's presentation is over and the public comment is closed. The applicant may clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising a hand and waiting to be called upon. Board members will be polled by the chairperson for comments and their vote on a motion. The chair shall reread a motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chair if I have not correctly restated the motion. Once a motion is in proper order and seconded, each member, when voting, should respond yea in favor or nay not in favor. Results will be posted on the city website at www.charleston-sc.gov/PAR. As of now, no agenda item has been withdrawn this evening. This is a friendly reminder to all participants, but perhaps most to our public guests who are visiting for the first time, or citizens visiting for the first time. Please turn off all cell phones and other disruptive devices, and understand that the purview of this board is limited to architecture, aesthetics, and neighborhood considerations. Comments specifically related to zoning, parking, traffic, lot coverage, or livability concerns are not within the purview of this board and therefore should not be voiced here or considered in the record. Moving right into business, the business we know we can conduct at the minute. We'll have as our first agenda item approval of the meeting minutes from the June 28th, 2023 meeting.
I'll move for approval as submitted.
There's a motion for approval by Mr. White. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Agenda item number 2. I'm sorry, excuse me. The agenda item on here, number 1, 529 Street. My bad. Is this Brower here? No.
Will do.
My name is Dylan Talbot, LSRP. We're the architect of record, and I have Rosanna Palone here from Morris Adjemy, who's the design architect. I wanted to thank the staff member who came out and reviewed my paper. I won't go through the presentation unless you all have any specific questions about it. We will read some of the details of questions you guys have on the site. So happy to answer any questions otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. Any questions from the board at this time? Sure.
I couldn't go yesterday, but I went today. And the end of this, I thought it looked great. The end of the sill is cut with a saw, so it gives it a little bit different appearance than the rest of the sill. So and is that the way they will all be cut?
Sorry, are you referring to the ones on the precast piece or the ones?
Yes, precast.
No, the intent is not to have them cut. They already measured.
I think one of the staff notes reflected that. Sorry. Very good. Any further questions this time for Mr. Tao? Thank you. Hearing none. Any public comment on this matter? City staff comments or recommendations?
This is one of the better mock-ups seen recently with only minor items to be addressed. Applicant explained on site that certain joints at the spring line of the window hood and at the window head center line are to be eliminated, resulting in a much smoother, cleaner look along the facade. The change from metal panels to GFRP at the canopy above the storefronts is preferable, avoiding segmental joints at the curb, but the GFRP product itself needs to be evaluated for durability. The proposed entry mosaic is appropriate contextual detail and helps to bring more focus to the entry. And some conditions for approval. Number 1, flashing under windowsills should be minimized, hemmed, and held vertical and flat against the surface below while maintaining the curved edge. 2, ceiling around windows at the brick wall should match the generalized brick and mortar blended color as shown above. As should the lintel above. And 3, information and in-place examples of the GFRP need to be provided as discussed previously. Staff's concern is less with GFRP and more with specific product use and its durability. And with that, our recommendation is approval with staff and board conditions.
Any response? Anything further from the board of the applicant or the first consideration?
I was at the sample panel yesterday, and it is a very high quality sample panel, partly because so much of it is made in the shop and just glued together on site. Note to applicants. I'm actually comfortable with the sealant colors that are proposed. They may be a little bit different from what staff is recommending. And I think we've had just enough experience with GFRP at this point, and it looks like it's factory finished, but it's an applied paint finish, that it'll just be a maintenance item, not unlike as if it were built out of wood. And it's a limited application on the facade. It's just that one eyebrow. So with those comments, I would be happy to approve this.
Thank you, Mr. White. Further board comments? Okay, entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for approval with board and staff comments.
Motion is for approval with board and staff comments. Is there a second to Mr. White's motion? Second Brown's in proper order. Mr. Betters, how do you vote on this agenda item? Mr. Brown? Yea. Mr. White? Yea. And myself, you need to vote thank you to the applicant. Agenda item number 3, 155 Meeting Street.
All right. We are having Mr. Eddie Bella step in as an alternate. He has been party before. Or 155 meeting, so go ahead and give the description and see how this is gonna work.
We're still having flag? If it wasn't clear to folks earlier before we started the meeting, we are having a technical issue which is making the slide presentations very slow. Each applicant will have the opportunity to decide to go ahead with their presentation, since we have people out of town, and we certainly appreciate that. Or if you wish to withdraw or defer with no penalty whatsoever, since it's a technical issue. Each applicant can consider the merits of that while you're waiting your turn.
John, this is just I don't know the technical, I mean, I have a computer, and I just plug it in. I have the PDF called out, I have to look at it, but I have no idea if that helps or not, but I mean, I've got another computer.
I think we'll take that up as we try to win.
Are these directly hardwired to wires? Have we tried to hardwire these to these?
Is the lag consistent?
It is consistent, but it is very slow, such that the traditional presentation format would be very difficult.
They're trying to communicate.
Mr. Chairman, I thought your suggestion was great. We should
Yeah, everybody can make their decision.
make their decision.
With their application at the time. We certainly understand, and I apologize on behalf of the city of Charleston for any inconvenience, any member of the public or any applicant tonight, and assure you that the problem will in fact be remedied. With that being said, 155 Meeting Street.
If you understood how long the lag was, when they still did this presentation, just knowing that we need to advance the slide before we speak about it.
It does, and I'll give Lawrence a second to conclude his sidebar. He did say at the beginning of the meeting, the lag time was sufficient, that if, even with just 4 presentations of merit this evening, we would be here for a long, long time. And that's fine. I'm a public servant. I can handle that. I have a feeling our applicants are going to have some difficulty with that.
Absolutely.
It's not on there yet, Lawrence.
So do you want a minute? Why don't we adjourn for just a minute and y'all mull that while we try to fix it, okay? Or not adjourn. We'll be at ease for 5 minutes.
We got there.
Good.
You gotta plug it right
It's on
in.
here. Put it on the flash drive and take it back there.
Oh, and have somebody advance it.
Plug it right in.
That machine is directly connected to this.
So everybody just have to shout next.
Figure it out.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's totally unexpected.
We'll drive by practice.
I think I can extend grace and hold this since that one. But if you're that 22nd, NBA is that
The grandparents. Oh, it is. I didn't realize it. Yes. Is it like a spend a semester?
everything should be on.
Yeah.
Have a-
A lot of the kids, but it's something that grew up nearby. It's split up. It's nice to get them the first in the city.
That's the staff, yeah. Well, I was just saying, I'm sitting there looking at my screen.
Mine said no.
So, yeah, but that would be the extent of my expertise.
Yes.
I sure don't want to be trying to figure it out.
Yeah. That's how. It's a big presentation. It is.
This did not change. This did not change. They can just focus on. I wasn't here for the second call.
I think this guy is under control.
What's the model? Oh, yeah. That's what that's what it is.
Are you still
And then it goes through a traditional Greek comic cycle, but it's all. There you go, look at
Okay. Okay, I am told that we have achieved a suitable workaround, and I'm in fact seeing it as Lawrence Courtney is available to freely flip through these slides. So we are, all systems go for the time being with that workaround, and we will proceed as if it's a regular meeting. 155 Main Street. 155 Main Street.
All right, 155 Main Street is requesting conceptual approval of a new mixed-use development with a 25-foot tall ground floor and a partial additional story based on architectural merit context. The project contains a mix of hotel, residential, restaurant, and retail uses. This one is in Charleston Village. The height districts are 3, 5, 6, and 7, and it's in the Orland Historic District. And then we've got some context for you. This is the old Days Inn site. Well, it is the Days Inn site. It was a Days Inn. Arbuck Alley is on the left. All right, we're ready to go.
Good evening, my name is Steve Ramos, I'm an architect here in Charleston. With my design partners, Ivana Musso-Corone and Nicholas Musser, both from Morris Adjmi Architects. Usually I have some nerves when I'm up here, and then when I thought we were gonna have to do this without slides, it really got me going. So no nerves now, I'm relieved. And so I'll just briefly speak to the previous meetings, and then we'll talk through the design changes, as well as kind of focus your attention toward the model. If you could advance the slide for me. Next. One more. Perfect. So what we've got here is the first meeting on the left, and then the second meeting on the right, and then of course this is the third meeting. And we put some of the comments up there, and at the first meeting, we heard that there was some specific concerns about the massing on Hurlbeck Alley, and that perhaps some removal of some of the mass on Hurlbeck would be warranted. And so coming into that second meeting, that's exactly what we did. We lowered what we refer to as the bookends by 1 floor. We also pushed kind of the center massing back just over 5 feet. So we really did create a lot more, say, space on Hurlbeck Alley. But at that meeting, although those changes were commended, there was still some thought that maybe some more reduction on Hurlbeck would be warranted. And furthermore, understanding the gravity of working around King Street, a physical model would help understand that relationship. So we have done a further reduction on Hurlbeck Alley as a result of the commentary. Of course, we have the physical model, which we're going to speak to in a moment. We also have about 10 more renderings in the set to help understand the views of the building as we walk around it from Meeting to Hurlbeck to King. Next slide. We have just some of the previous renderings, just to remind everybody of what the architecture looks like. None of this has changed, so this view from Meeting Street is the same. Next. This is a view down the main entrance to the hotel. Next. This is a view on the western alley. There's a little galleria that cuts through the building. Again, this is still intact. Next. And then what we refer to as the conservatory on the 8th floor. There are no design changes to this top of the building. Next. And just for reference, although this is more of a preliminary architecture review, we do have some just snapshots of details of the building, both materials as well as the metalwork and railings and things of that nature, just for reference. Next. We have all of the comments from both city staff and the board that were recorded in a set. I'm not going to read through these, but if we need to reference them, they're here for us. And you can just cycle through these. Thank you. Next. 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 Go one more, I think. Okay, we had a lot of comments, I guess. We want to be thorough in the presentation. And so this is just a summary of what we've changed, which I mentioned. We've lowered the massing on Hurlbeck, which Rosanna is going to present. And we did kind of mirror that onto the north facade. Other than that, there have not been any exterior facade changes, but we do have a lot of additional views that we're going to show as well as the physical model. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rosanna.
Good evening. So I would like to share in more detail some design changes that we did specifically on Hurlbeck in response to the comments that we heard during the previous meeting on Route 14. So if you can go to the next slide. Thank you, Damo. So this slide is the rendering standing Meeting Street, looking Hurlbeck, and this represents the previous design. We heard your concern about the height of the building along Hurlbeck Alley, and so we are trying to address at the best to deliver the best design possible. This is the previous design where, as they mentioned, we already lowered to 6th floor the bookends along Hurlbeck previous design. And if we go to the next slide, this is our current design. So we wanted to respond to the comments on perhaps adding like a more homogeneous continuous line at the top of the parapet along Hurlbeck Alley. So we tried to lower the 5th floor the height of the 2 bookends along Hurlbeck, so that we set back 2 floors at the top of the 2 bookends of a generous 8 feet. So that the building can better respond to the street or Hurlbeck Alley and get a more kind of a better scale relationship. So also in this view, you can also start to see, and we see that in the next slide, but even in this view we see how we broke down massive by pushing considerably back the center portion of our street wall to create a very dynamic facade and lots of breathing room. So this is the lower 5 floor was our major design response. And then if you go to the next slide, here is another view standing now at Orbeck near the bridge. This is the previous design where you can see only 1 floor lower down. And then if you go to the next slide, this is our current design. So you can see 5 floor or the 2 bookends with 2 floor setback, as I previously mentioned, over 8 feet step back. And also with this view, we can really appreciate it. The center portion now is being pushed back over 7 feet from the face of the building. Also, I would like to remember that above the 3rd floor, the building opens up in a pocket garden court to give even more breathing room to the street and bringing light and air at the center portion of the building. And looking on more pedestrian level, so where now we do not have sidewalk along Orbeck Alley, our design is proposing 10 feet setback, giving sidewalk to public rail, and in the center portion now we are over 17 feet of recess, giving even a more breathing room. As you can see along the street, we are adding those canvas canopy to give like a nice and warm feeling, to be in tune with the look and feel of Charleston. And even the center portion, which is service access, and we also wanted to treat with the best that we can. As a matter of fact, we have a metal and glass operable door, so we embrace the architecture also like service access. But especially we are giving to public realm, which is one of the concepts of the entire project and the urban design all along the block. We can go to the next slide, thank you. So here, we focus a moment on the detail of the actual bookends with an elevation and like close-up view to try to explain a little bit the direction that we would like to take over design. This is the previous design, but in general, the intent was to provide a more subtle, but still elegant and classical facade, composed of a grid of opening to create a sort of hierarchy going from the 2nd floor up. The 2nd and 3rd floor are simple windows where we have the parking, and then going up, we have Juliet balcony, inset terrace, and then open terrace, creating more like a classical order going up. And then if we go to the next page, this is our current proposed design. You can see below the 5th floor, 2 bookends. And then we still maintain the concept of the design that we intend to further develop, but we still have the same kind of concept or order going up. And even in this preliminary conceptual phase, we can start to see the level of detail that we would like to achieve moving forward, and you can appreciate in the accuracy of the corners at the lower level and at the top, just to tell you the direction and the level of the architecture that we would like to possibly continue to study. So this is kind of a close-up of our site. If we go to the next page, here we have a comparison of the previous design at the top and the current proposed design at the bottom, where with the new proposed design, we really would like to address this kind of more cohesive, continuous line at the top of the parapet along the street, along the Orbeck Alley. And then you can also see, even in through the elevation, how the vent side is breaking down in portion. And then we focus on the left, and we will continue to presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Steve and Rosanna. A few additional points on this sheet. There's some questions at the last meeting about the relationship with our bookends and the adjacent buildings on King Street. So we just wanted to add a few dimensions here and highlight those points. Also, looking at this view, you can see the sight lines, that kind of diagonal line. As you're standing on King Street, your view is typically rising over the King Street cornice, where our building is set back a substantial 125 feet, really minimizing when it's visible. In most cases, it is not visible, and so we will highlight those details in a few additional slides as well. Next slide. So this is a survey that we did, really looking at some existing buildings that you all are probably familiar with, looking at some taller structures that have been set back, and really just trying to kind of understand how that's working. So as an example, for the Hyatt House, you can see the right of way is noted. It's a wide 60-foot street at that portion of King Street, and the taller mass is set back 110 feet. So if you go to the next slide, you can see from that street view what's visible in these images. We can keep moving. There's just observations looking at some of these examples of how these taller structures have been set back and how they work in Charleston. Another example, you go, you can see this. This is an interesting example just because this frontage on King is rather low, and the taller structure beyond is still kind of minimally visible. Next slide. Charleston Place that we know near our site, the width of King Street is closer to 50 feet here, and then the taller mass is only set back 42 feet. So you can see that in the next view as you walk down King Street. And then our next slide, please. Our project, again, similar to what I mentioned previously, our building is set back 125 feet from King Street. King Street also narrows at this portion down to closer to 40 feet. And if you look at the next slide, we see, let me go back one, sorry. As you walk down King Street, there's this moment at Fulton Lane where you can see our building beyond, but it is set back sufficiently to really reduce that visual impact. It doesn't break the cornice line of King Street, which we have spent thinking about considering trying to fit this into this site. Next slide. And the last example, two examples, are looking at the Judiciary Center on the right that was mentioned last time. It steps back from King Street, as well as Mills House. Mills, I think, for us is really just just looking at that frontage on Queen. It's a long building face, 7 stories, 272 feet long. And I think when you compare that to our frontage on Horlbeck, we have a nuanced facade that steps back. There are frontages, the bookends are 80 feet, the middle portion is under 80, and it's a more nuanced kind of ground plane, just as a reference. So this Queen Street is 33 feet here. With our proposal, the Horlbeck will be between 34 and 42 feet. So there's some variation with the ground plane there as well, as a reference point. Next slide. Let's see the Mills House here meeting. Next slide. And this portion of the presentation is a walk down King Street, walking south on King Street. You can see the view here at Princess Lane. There's just a small corner of our building visible. We should have highlighted that, but between Princess, small portion visible there. This is the same massing that was presented last meeting. That portion has not changed. And if you go to the next slide, you can just see as you move down King Street, our building does not break the cornice line. Next slide, please. So we can keep moving. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So we stop here again with view at Fulton Lane. You can see our building beyond, but with that setback, we think that the height is really minimized on King, the impact. Next slide. Keep moving. Next slide. And at this hyphen, even with this hyphen, it's set back off King, but our building is still not visible here. Next slide. Next slide. So this view we spent time talking about last time. This is the previous design with a step back just at the top floor. If you go to the next slide, you can see here that reduced height, within these bookends striking the line at the 5-story line, we think fits well. We think this is a very narrow opening at Horlbeck. Is a kind of brief window down Horlbeck. And regardless of what's built here, it is visible. Next slide. And then there are a few moments. After south of Horlbeck, the King Street building started to step down. So this 3-story building. Next slide. And then a 2-story building, and that is one moment where our building is visible. We want to be transparent about that. It is visible, but it by no means is towering over King Street. And it will be handsomely detailed, and we think it will fit in and add to the character and context of the portion of the city. Next slide. This chapter is a bit more insight into the pedestrian experience on Horlbeck. We wanted to share what that feels like, since we have talked about it at length. This is arriving from King, moving east towards Meeting Street. Next slide. On the left here, you start to see what will be the pedestrian western alley that will connect to the passageway that we shared previously. Next slide. And as we continue to move east, you see that kind of nuanced ground floor expression, activation. Next slide. The step back at the left side, that 3-story building has been stepped back, as we've discussed in the past, and the sidewalk there is now 17 feet, really opening up Horlbeck. Next slide. And again, more activation, nuance, and texture, and layers to the facade detailing. Next slide. And you have a break here. It's a little hard to see on the left side of the bridge, but there's another break in this frontage. Grand Hotel is visible on the left. That's here. And then next slide. Previous slide. And this rendering that you've seen anchored the Grand Hotel anchoring that corner, looking again back down Horlbeck. Next slide. And we're here tonight for asking for conceptual approval, conceptual VAR approval, including the partial 8th floor for architectural merit and context, as well as the 25-foot tall ground floor. We feel like we have heard the comments. We've discussed this and debated this at length. We think the additional site images and visual model hopefully satisfy those concerns.
So just briefly, we'll just talk to the model just to get everybody oriented. This is King Street here, and this is Meeting Street here, so north of this direction. So of course, this is our project here. Got a couple little tools here just to kind of understand, we can use the scale, and it kind of shows view angles when you're along King Street, and it shows just how tight King Street is. And so, but as Nick pointed out, where the project is probably most visible is here, where we kind of have some missing teeth and lower buildings on King Street. So this kind of southwest corner. We also kind of made the model. If anybody wants to come walk around and take a closer look, we kind of made it so that we could pull away the street and kind of bring this to the corner, and you can actually get your eye down at street level to really understand the visibility. And so it's up here if anybody wants to come play with it. I hope you do.
Okay, all right.
Come on. Come on. Let's stretch your legs.
Steve, can you rotate and put that piece back on?
King Street.
And maybe rotate it all the way.
Try to get a picture of this. While you guys are looking at that, that is the conclusion of our presentation, so we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Steve. Does any of the board or staff have any questions for the applicant's team at this time?
That view you just pointed out, I think this,
Any questions at this moment? Hearing none, thank you for that. We'll let our board members resume their seats after having a couple of views. And then we'll move into the public comment here as well. As a reminder to members of the public, please state your name and address for the record. There's a 2-minute time limit on comments unless it's stated by the chair. Members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda item, please approach the podium.
I will say the presentation was great, period. But just, when you think about what's there, I agree, this looks beautiful compared to what's there. But how much bigger this is than what is in that area? My number one concern in all this talk, nobody has talked about a parking garage. Where is the cars gonna be parked? And if you're gonna have accommodations or apartments and stuff in this building, where are you gonna have the parking for the people that are living there? How about the employees? And how about the guests that are coming in? I think that we really need to start really considering, when we have developers to come in here, that they have got to include parking in their designs. Because when I go down to the courthouse to look up deeds and stuff, the parking lot is almost half of it's reserved. So with this coming in where it's coming, I think there needs to be a design in here with some parking spaces.
And I'm sorry, ma'am, your name and address for the
Oh,
record?
I'm sorry. My name is Myra Paulson. I live at 22 Lawrence Street.
Thank you, Ms. Paulson. Further members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda item. Ms. Minigan.
Erin Minigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. First, we would like to thank the applicant for meeting with us to walk us through the updated plans. We continue to feel this project represents a high-quality design, and in particular, the two building components fronting Meeting Street are well executed in their massing, architecture, and will contribute significantly to the public realm. However, our position remains unchanged, and that the height, scale, and mass of the rear portion of the building is completely inappropriate for its setting in the historic district. The Preservation Society recently undertook a 3D visualization study of the building using GIS, which confirms it is significantly out of scale with the surrounding context. We did send these in to city staff yesterday. I hope you received a copy, and if not, I do have some here for you. What is particularly telling from these renderings is just how incompatible the hotel's footprint and form are with the city's urban building patterns. Taller building examples in the historic districts such as the Mills House, People's Building, and even the Charleston Place are vertically oriented with narrow footprints in keeping with Charleston's architectural traditions. The proposed structure presents a large blocky mass that overwhelms the small-scale historic buildings just a few feet away from the site. This project has been deferred twice, indicating the board has serious misgivings about the lack of compatibility this massive 8-story building has with the historic context. We urge you to hold the line and deny the request for additional height, which would exacerbate the building's adverse impacts to the prevailing character of the district. Merit waivers should be reserved for projects that do an exceptional job of breaking up their massing to conform to the unique patterns of Charleston. Please protect our city's architectural integrity and unique sense of place by mitigating the impacts of this highly intense development. Say no to an 8th floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Minigan. Additional members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda item, please approach the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board. So I'm Joe McGee. I live at 1 Magazine Street, just about a block and a half down from this property. I too urge the board's rejection of the current design, the ask for the 8th floor. It is a very large mass building. I've had the occasion to observe, while not the developer, other properties like this of the Four Seasons around the world. They blend with architecture, most recently in Milano, Italy. You have to look for the address. Those structures do not dominate the street as this does. And so I think there's been some great changes made by the architects to the scale and to the size. Further needs to be done. And an 8th floor is counter to the zoning regulations. It should not be allowed. Charleston is unique. We need to preserve that uniqueness while also adapting to the new. And I think that's possible with further iteration to the design. And I urge your decision in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. Other members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda item? Yes, sir.
My name is Stuart Gross, and my partner, Marlena Parker, and I renovated 62 Queen Street. It is currently a cafe and short-term rental above. It's an original building and is now on the historic registry. And I have mixed feelings because I've been a developer all my professional life. And I look at this piece of property and I think, somebody's going to develop this. At some point in time, there's going to be somebody who can justify the cost of that real estate, like what the available FAR would be. However, the other side of me says, people don't come to Charleston to see Charleston Place or Four Seasons. They come to Charleston because of the projects like we did, which take an original building, restore it in the French Quarter, be compatible with the neighborhood, and at the same time, bring benefit to the neighborhood. This, unfortunately, is going to be, I think, a massive addition to this area, flooding the French Quarter, and I'm not sure that it ultimately is serving the best interest of Charleston. I think it's a great design, I think it's a great project, but as a developer, I can understand how that would be very compelling. But this just changes Charleston, and the downtown has been changed. We're equidistant between the Cooper and now the Four Seasons, right between the traffic and the parking. Is that a legitimate discussion point in this forum?
We as you will note, I'm probably a more liberal chairman than many, in that I like members of the public to feel like that they have had the opportunity to speak. It's just a friendly reminder that issues such as lot coverage, parking, traffic flow, et cetera, are not really the purview of this board. I would say for the benefit of my board, we don't really consider those, but please, with that consideration.
As a resident of 62 Queen Street, because I live there as well, I'm required to live there because of the STR rules. And I can tell you that already with the advent of the development of Cooper, that the traffic patterns around that area of French Quarter are going to be disastrous. There's no way to get in and out of Queen Street. Is an extension of Pond View. You take Washington Street, ends around Pond View, goes up Queen Street. There's a lot of traffic that comes that way, and now there's much more once the Cooper is there. And if you put this density in there, it's going to be a very significant problem. So if this is not the correct venue to discuss that, I would recommend that the BAR go back to the zoning, which I presume is responsible for that, state parking, the impact on traffic. Is that correct?
We don't appear before other boards, whereas we're a separate board.
I understand that, but can you not communicate to them?
We do, and on various matters, but not usually on specific proposals, just because South Carolina's administrative law.
You guys are going to approve this thing architecturally, but any concern about what the impact is on the residents around there and the traffic and parking and those issues that are related to this.
Traffic patterns are resolved by the technical review committee, which is staff level committee in the city of Charleston.
And all hotels have to go through a special exception process, which has a traffic study and the parking, all of that stuff has already gone through. It's a public process. And they've already gone through that, otherwise we couldn't see it.
So the FAR in this development right here has been approved by the zoning board.
Yes.
So the fact is, the zoning board is one that controls the issues that I think people are concerned about.
For the-
which is maps.
For the benefit of our current speaker and for all members of the public, it's very important to understand, and I wish there was a color-coded chart in this regard, that BAR is virtually the end of the line.
And I understand.
We're after figuring out where curb cuts and fire hydrants and traffic patterns and ADA guidance and how many floors people are technically qualified and the envelope of the buildings in terms of its overall potential volume,
Right.
as well as the uses. All of those things have already been decided. We get to decide what it looks like.
And I'm just, I have nothing on it, but I just want to reiterate how important that is to, it's more difficult to be involved at a zoning process level because we don't have visuals like these. But that is one of a lot of really big decisions we made.
You know, the horse is less stable, yes, me, okay? I mean, if that mass is gonna be there, then I'd say this is probably as good a body as you're ever gonna get. I mean, it's beautiful, the architecture's great, you know. So I'm distressed that the city fathers would put this horse at the end of the line because, you know, people to understand the consequences. You couldn't do any better than that design, but you can certainly do better with that amount of square foot of land and achieve objectives that people like me and then in New York City redevelop existing property, which is now on the historic registry. And that's what New Deal is. I mean, I don't come down here to go to the Wicked Four Seasons or Cooper. I come down here to go to Church Street, State Street, right? Okay. So I guess this is tilting window at this point.
Thank you for your remarks.
Thank
Further members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda item. Yes, sir.
I'm Frank Holdaway. My wife's never been in Arson. I live at 47 Logan Street here, just down the way. We're kind of newbies here, you know. I've been coming down to Charleston for the last 12, 14 years. Charleston is beautiful downtown and like Broad Street, and this is what drew me to Charleston. I stayed at the Days Inn when we were coming down here, and to see something like this happening. I live, you know, down the street from the Jasper and stuff here, this Cooper Hotel. It just nauseates me, you know, as far as this is not what people come to Charleston, this international city, you know, the beauty of the old homes and everything else here. And then you get some, you know, big buildings like this, like we've been talking about, beautiful architecture. I mean, you know, and as some of the previous meetings that I've gone to, some of these things should be north of Calhoun. Okay, south of Calhoun is probably more observed a little bit more architecturally, you know, and to see something like this here is well, you know, so, I mean, to be in line with maybe 3, 4 stories and stuff like this, yeah, going into 7 and 8 stories and stuff like that. Okay, the views from the, what they presented was great, you know, so the view from King Street and all the other stuff here, but you look at even that model there, it's just like, oh my God. So just as a resident in the area and stuff, I'm concerned about traffic here. I have parking issues in front of my own house, you know, and stuff. The tourists coming in, I have no idea where these tourists are going to be going, you know. There was a concern about the Carnival Cruise Line and all these tourists coming in for that here. Okay, they come and go and stuff. These guys are going to stay and all that. And then parking, I think, is a big issue. And just traffic and all that here. I don't even, we'll walk downtown here. I mean, it's just driving downtown is crazy. It just, but irrelevant to that here, it's just, this is a monstrosity in something that is an 1800s environment. You're building this monstrosity in an 1800s environment, and that's what people come down here to Charleston for. That's what drew me down here, you know. Again, after seeing Jasper and then the hotel, you know, seeing this here, what else is going to come here? So it's just here. I don't want this to turn into a sedan. Thank you.
Other members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda. Mr. Schwebler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Justin Schwebler of the Historic Charleston Foundation. We'd first like to thank the applicants for their regular communication with us throughout the development of this project. There continues to be positive changes in the overall massing to reduce the visual impact of the important historic context on King and Meeting Street. We continually advocated for making the 8th story, which is proposed architectural merit, not visible from any portion of Meeting Street. We've also pushed for more pedestrian improvements along Holbeck Alley, including wider sidewalks, relocation of loading docks, more storefront activation, and recessing the upper stories of the building to reduce the canyon effect of the alley, which the applicant has responded to. The project has always maintained an incredible high standard of architectural design and interior application. But despite the quality of the architecture, we cannot support the application for architectural merit due to the overall height of the application. We maintain our position that the 8th story of this application is too tall and too visible, particularly at Meeting Street. The conservatory would make the building top out around 120 feet, which is a rough equivalent of a 12-story building. We feel that this is inappropriate for this location in context. Because of the quality of the architecture, the pedestrian improvements, recessing the upper stories on floors along Holbeck Alley, we recommend conceptual approval of the 7-story design, which conforms to a zoning, but request denial of the application for architectural merit.
Thank you, Mr. Schwebler. Other members of the public who should be heard on this agenda.
I'm John McCullough. I live at 175 Market Street in Charleston Village. And I want to keep this short because I know some of the points have already been made that are good. And I heard the discussion at the last meeting about the model. And I also saw the SC's, the model that was there. When I look at today's listing, this is in Charleston Village. And so I think the focus so far has been pretty much King Street, but because it's such a narrow street, of course, it's gonna be tough to see over the buildings if they're right in your face. But as you move back a couple of more blocks, in my building, there's quite a few stories. But people in tall houses shouldn't throw stones. But when I look out, you see the tall buildings, you don't see close up. So I hope your discussion will be like last time, people talked about viewing it from the bridge. I'm just talking about looking at it from Charleston Village. So I'm looking forward to your discussion about that. I go back to the basics. The basics are, in conceptual design, you look at the height, scale, and mass, and you look at it in the overall direction. And I believe that that's where we should focus in a period of time, if we have any more time, to see how that affects. We have the Wentworth Hotel, which is very famous, and I saw the other large buildings. But each time, whether even Charleston Place has a nice front yard that they're using more and more as an open park place. They even fill in that street for Park Place. They're doing a gateway next to the walkway, so that's going to be park space. We don't need something that fills up every inch, not just the Days Inn footprint, but they bought more properties, so they fill it up chock-a-block full, I guess is the expression. So that's my point. I think if we are talking about conceptual review, we should look at the overall massing of the building, the scale of the building, and how it relates and has impact on Charleston Village. Because when they set up these districts back in 1970, a long time ago, they said, we care about skylines. They talk about that in water. And I don't think the skyline from King Street is really the only place that matters. It's the skyline from when in your other buildings and how you see it. So that's my point about height, scale, and mass. I think your guys are going to discuss it, so you folks are going to discuss it some more. On zoning, I'm not going to get into zoning, but when you look up the zoning online, it says property may be included in additional zoning districts. Please verify with map. I went to school on zoning on the 295 Calhoun project, looked it up there, and the point is, the zoning it's in is old and historic district, and that puts it in the bar. So what you folks are doing, it used to be, well, once you get a zone at a certain height, that's what you're allowed to have, and you always can have that. No, we get to look at the bar in height, scale, and mass, and you're able to adjust things if it doesn't fit within the neighborhood character of the building. And it's height, scale, and mass as it relates to the site, to the neighborhood, surrounding buildings, and the city of Charleston. So I just wanted to expand the conversation and the examination beyond just King Street. I want to use that model. There are some other tall buildings, but they're often surrounded by a lot of other buildings. So that's my 2 points. Could we please focus on conceptual review? I agree about the 8th story, but again, I think we're off on a detour looking at the 8th floor. The big issue is the size of the overall mass of the building as it relates to the neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. Other members of the public wishing to be heard on this issue? Hearing none, city staff comments or recommendations?
All right, a little bit of analysis, the applicant, as indicated. The applicant submitted a response to board comments by providing a physical model, by depicting additional views and perspectives from King Street, and by stepping down the portion of the massing directly against Wellbank Alley, reflecting this on the north facade also. Like the previous review, staff has agreed that some staff comments provided at the initial review in May can be incorporated into the preliminary design review. Similarly, the staff comments are repeated from the previous review of June in order to be incorporated into the record as conditions of a conceptual approval, and these can be coordinated between conceptual and preliminary. Staff conditions for approval: number 1, continue to study the bridge element, especially how the members underneath which form the barrel vault can coordinate with solid elements and fenestration occurring on the building at grade level. Continue to study how the bottom of the bridge element is articulated. Review shifting the spanning elements to make for 4 full bays with a half bay on the ends. Another repeat comment: applicant is strongly encouraged to work with neighboring property owners on design and coordination of extending the proposed pedestrian alley to Market Street. And third repeat comment: the vertical post at the top railing would benefit from being visually heavier to have the railing appear less dense light. This can be incorporated at preliminary along with other agreed upon items by staff. And number 4 is a new comment. Balconies are now proposed at the 7th floor against Horbeck in coordination with the increased height of the step back. This makes for a busy composition instead of clean massing at the top. And this is partially due to the proximity of these balconies to the 6th floor cornice. Because these are visible from King and Main Streets, I omit them to simplify and clean up the architecture. And as similar to last time, we are recommending conceptual approval with staff conditions and board comments.
Thank you, Tori. Applicant response.
How do we agree? Could you go back to slide 65? Thank you to all the folks from the public that came out to the meeting tonight. Ms. Minigan, Mr. McGee, Ms. Holtzen, Mr. Gross, Sir, missed your name. Great. What was your last name? Thank you. Mr. Schwebler, Mr. McCullough, thank you. It's kind of a nuisance sometimes to come out with these, but so thank you. It's also inspiring to see how people get passionate about Charleston. The easy comments I can address, which are not in the purview, like parking. We do have parking in the building. It's underground and above ground. We have adequate parking for the project. And the traffic patterns are something that we closely examine. We have a traffic engineer, so there are certainly issues. The horse has not left the stable, but those things are being addressed. I think there's obviously concern about footprint and scale of the project in relation to the context, and rightfully so. This is a dense project. It is a large redevelopment right in the center of the city, so we are really sensitive to that. And we talked a lot about King Street at the last meeting. King Street is like my favorite room in Charleston, and the sides of the buildings really define that room. And so doing something to disrupt that is something that we absolutely don't want to do. And we've gone to great length to ensure that that is simply not the case. We confess that the building's visible. It is visible from points of view. It's certainly of our opinion that the exquisite architecture will add to the skyline, but in no ways does it diminish the aesthetic impact that King Street has. And the 30 plus renderings we have in this package help show that. We showed the massings of other projects just to help people understand how impactful setbacks can be. And even the model, does just that. It showcases that at street level, which is how we evaluate projects in Charleston, that this project, although dense, is marginally visible. And the areas that are visible are really of high quality architecture. And like I said at the first meeting, we understand that the architectural merit has to be earned. and the tremendous amount of streetscape improvements we made at Meeting Street, Hurlbeck, as well as the West Alley, we feel like are going to positively transform this area, as will the architecture. And so I appreciate everybody's feedback and time, and we look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Okay. Board discussion and a vote on this agenda.
I'll kick it off and I'll be really brief because I feel like I've talked enough about this project already. So I agree with staff's comments and I agree with the recommendation. This applicant is proposing a really high quality design. It's been carefully studied as we've requested now over 3 iterations of conceptual review. And it's sensitively massed and sited. It's a large building, but the way it's broken down with a composition of small footprints is how you fit into Charleston's fabric. Height is not the only metric. In fact, height is oftentimes the least important metric to making Charleston make sense. We have a lot of buildings that are far taller than we might normally recognize when we walk past them on the street. I think this is a fantastic project. I think they've done a lot to address community concerns and comments from the board, and I support its conceptual approval with the 8th story.
Thank you, Mr. White. Other board members?
Well, good. I was here first time when it was deferred. Just to echo some of the things that Jay has said, I think it's an excellent project to design. Even the people that were opposed to it, it's a great design, sort of accidentally. I think one of the things that we have to remember is what the BAR is supposed to do. The BAR is charged with protecting our historic districts and really what is visible from the public right of way, what those impacts are. I think we get kind of lost sometimes thinking about things that don't really impact the public right of way that much. I think if you think about this project, it is a big project, but the key impacts are Holbeck Alley and Meeting Street. And I don't think anybody disagrees that the way they've broken up the massing and the project on Meeting Street is excellent. I had a concern last time with Holbeck Alley because it was just very large on that narrow street. But since then, they've completely addressed that, and I have no concerns. And today I went down, and I know the site pretty well, but I was like, let me go look at the site one more time. And I walked down King. It's about 98 degrees out there today. But there's going to be no impact to King Street. And I don't mean that you might see a sliver of the building in between some other buildings. That's not what the BAR is set up for. It's not, are you going to see a piece in between 2 buildings? Is that okay? We have purview technically, but that's not the point of the BAR. What is the impact on the public right of way? And I am very confident that King Street is not going to be affected. Certainly not by the little glass conservatory thing at the top. And I respect the historic groups. I know they're not in support, but I don't think adding that extra floor is going to impact the public well in any negative way. I think it's a great addition. It's very small. It's what you would expect. So I am very much in support. The 2 comments about the railing at the top that staff had, I would defer to the architects on that. They've shown that they can come up with something creative. So I wouldn't mandate that the railings be thicker. I'll take it as a suggestion maybe. And actually, I don't have any problem with those balconies on Holbeck Alley. I think they would be super nice if I was there. And I don't think, again, if I'm walking down Holbeck Alley, I'm not going to notice those balconies. So again, I think we've got to focus on what you actually experience at the street level. And I think they've done a really good job at that level.
Thank you, Mr. Bello. Further board comments?
Steve said in his closing, what you will see is architecturally significant. you'll see stuff. If you're a block away or 5 blocks away, and it's going to be good looking. For the most part, I agree with that, but I don't agree with it looking down Harlbeck. I think that's the one area where, if you look at that south elevation of those 2 bookends, it's not particularly attractive. And so when I'm looking and I see that, it's not like when I'm back and looking up and seeing what Eddie's talking about. It's attractive. It looks good. This looks good. But when you look at those 2 bookends, I don't find those attractive. They are what they are, and they may blend the rest of the project together, but I don't find that portion of the project appealing. I agree. When you're walking down King Street, you're going to see slivers of it. There's no question about it. And I do think that we have to be conscious of those views that you see through the alleys, because when I come to Charleston, when I walk down Philadelphia Alley, looking down those alleys is what's important to me. And I like that view, and you're going to see this through that view. I remember Eddie Bello when that first curved glass building was being put up at MUSC. You and I were having a conversation about it, and you said, that could have had another story, and it still would have been fine. And I agree with that. I thought that was it was limited by our rules. I do think there are times when a building should be taller, and I don't think the community would have known a difference if that building was 1 floor taller. If you take the time and walk around, there are pockets of views, not just in those alleyways on King Street, but all around the community where you're going to be able to look up and see it. I think it's going to look good. But the Harlbeck view is uncomfortable for me, and I think I could be comfortable with that if, as 1 floor has been removed now, the 2nd floor were removed, which would put that first step out approximately in alignment with the cornice on the front building, and that would help. That would help me. To include the rest of the building, including the additional floor.
I'm also hearing you and looking at this mock-up, because I don't want to put words in your mouth. We walked around and we noted some of those views that maybe weren't in the slides, but we could acknowledge you would see more of the building from, still very nice architecture, with the exception of Laurelback Alley. I'm not hearing you say you like the other elevations and how they present. Yes. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I understood you clearly. Yeah. Further board comments?
So when I was a kid and I was on a Little League baseball team, one of my first hits, went out into the park and I went down the foul line to first base. Everyone kept yelling, keep running, keep running. And I did, right down the foul line. At the end of it, my dad said, good effort, Steve. I think this is a good effort, but we're still running down the foul line. We're not coming around to what I think many of the citizens who have spoken up in previous meetings and those who spoke up tonight and those that were addressed in public comment. There were 33 comments addressed in the public record that were given to us prior to tonight. 32 of them were in opposition of the project. I'm so glad that y'all provided this model for us. I mean, it really does help me a lot in understanding when I'm looking at this in the context of the block, of its neighbors, and of the city generally. That is an incredible massing, an incredible height that does not find any neighbors in close proximity. Even looking at Charleston Place and the height, its verticalness is completely different than what has been proposed here. The architecture along Meeting Street is beautiful. I don't think anyone can deny that. I mean, we've said it repeatedly, and I have as well. I'm not in favor of the 8th floor, partial floor for architectural merit. And I think that the BAR has the opportunity to also lower it by 1/2 story to make it more appropriate to in the context of where it is in the city and in the district. Where conceptual, height, scale, mass, architectural direction. Certainly doing well in architectural direction, but height, scale, and mass. There's an opportunity to do something great, and I think we're still running down the foul line.
Mr. Chairman, one more comment. Sure. I brought up a project over at MUSC. And I failed to say, but it's where it's a location where it is. It's on the outer boundaries of the city, and it seems appropriate. And I use that as an example with the model and with the view corridors that you have downtown, regardless of their volume, their number. It's more difficult for me to have the proposed height in that location than at American University. Frankly, but because of the quality of what we're going to get, if I could overcome the Horbeck issue with one additional floor, I could be on board with it.
I would just add briefly that at our last meeting regarding this project, we basically had procedural asks of the applicant, which was to give us some understanding of what this looked like from the street on King Street and other key locations, and bring up the mock-up. I know there had been some dispute about whether there's a requirement or not, and I think we can all agree that we're much more informed in every way by looking at a 3D model, which is a note to other applicants. Yes, I'm aware it's expensive. Yes, I'm aware it's tedious. I think it's been a very worthwhile exercise for comments that have been brought up tonight. I would say in defense of the applicant that we have to be careful that when the applicant does what we've asked them to do, we don't send them on another round of, oh, by the way. It's our job as a board to be as comprehensive as we can when we make additional asks and defer an applicant, because there are a lot of moving parts, and I certainly appreciate that. I think the applicant has checked the boxes on the specific things that we asked them to do, and now we're back at the conversation about whether the conservatory on top is appropriate, is what I'm hearing. A general concern about the volume of this building in relation to others, although seeing this model reminds me of the portions of the Charleston place that we never see unless you're in it or driving up to it, and certainly you're off of the main thoroughfares. The same being true with the courthouse and county complex. That yes, that's a large volume on here. You have to be looking for some of the elevations that are in fact massive if you want to see them. So I can get my head around that, and I think the model helps. So I'm generally supportive of what the applicant has said. I'm also thinking about what Mr. Metters has said about giving one more cut to the Horbeck Alley elevation. That comment is tempered, as I've said previously, that I don't think this applicant should be punished for the fact that some of the other buildings on Horbeck Alley are hostile to the pedestrian experience.
To say the least.
Yes. Or that they don't allow it at all, not even hostile, it's verboten. So, and I'll leave my comments at that. Further board comments or a motion? I've heard the makings of what I think are a couple motions here.
I'll introduce a motion, certainly not to stop discussion, but just to keep things flowing. And because comments from the board have been rather mixed, I think I'll just make this very simple. And because I think the applicant, to your point, has responded to the specific requests that the board has made in deferring this twice before, and because the design team is moving in a really exciting direction with the architecture, I'm going to make a motion for conceptual approval including 25-foot ground floor and 8th story.
So, and intentionally leaving out board and staff comment.
I think all those should be taken
Recommendations.
as suggestions as they move forward.
Mr. White's motion is for conceptual approval, including the 25-foot elevation on the first floor, as well as the additional floor of height for architectural merit.
For architectural merit, that's correct.
And that's it. And no board and staff comments.
Yes, sir.
Is there a second to that motion? I'll second that. There's a second from Mr. Bello. The motion is in order, so I'll go down the roll. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
No, not in favor.
Mr. Metters?
None in favor.
Mr. Bello? Mr. White?
Yea, in favor.
And myself, nay, not in favor. So the motion fails for a majority. Is there another motion for further debate on this agenda item?
Before another motion is made, I want to ask you, sounds like your main hangup is the massing on Holbeck. Is that the key? Specifically the height on Holbeck. But the design is okay, it's just too big.
I think if you go to page 33 of 146. Andy, as we've discussed before, I'm not gonna get into design.
I know, I'm just trying to make sure they understand, so they get the part.
33. Okay, so what on my computer, I had a different 33. Okay. So what I'm looking for is the straight on shot of the south elevation. Okay.
Probably later.
I think it's earlier.
Yeah, earlier.
Six. This could change.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the total bookend. And I think that there's a rendering of that. So we've had, it's okay, I mean, this is, we've talked about the meeting street view and the architectural detailing, and I mean, it's wonderful, right? But then when you come to Harlbeck, we're on the Harlbeck side, and it is what it is. I mean, you've got the openings in the wall, you've got the things that you have to deal with just for the building to be successful. I mean, you have to have it, I get that. And you're never going to see this like this, right? Because your back's going to be against the parking garage, or it's going to be against whatever's there. So it's almost unfair, but it's still a responsibility to the total design for that to be appropriate. But I think that if one additional floor for me, we're taking off of that. And it's not really for this view, it's for King Street and Meeting Street view. That would help. I've said that before. I'll stick with that.
You added a little more detail to that.
I have a question.
Mr. Brown.
What are we calling the three buildings again? There's the Grand.
Yes, so the smallest building is the gatehouse. Okay. The 5-story structure on Meeting is the Grand Hotel. Okay. And this is what we call the residential hotel. Just for clarification, this cornice does align with the Grand Hotel.
Okay.
That's what I thought.
We have the previous design on the previous slide for reference, but this is the, so it does align.
Further board commentary or motion?
And this has been proposed before, and I know it's no one's favorite sort of proposal. I'm going to ask a question. Is there an opportunity to split the approvals between the 3 different buildings?
It is possible it has been done. I think it has been disfavored. The general assumption being if there's a problem with the whole elevation, we do a deferral.
Well, so,
But I've got older, wiser members here.
oh, just
Older.
more worn out, maybe. So if it is possible to do a split motion, it's difficult when it's in fact kind of all one building. But if there's a specific item that the board is convinced will make it palatable and make it fit the context, then you can introduce that as a condition. You're kind of playing with fire because you're anticipating what it might look like. So, like as James has said, well, we dropped this elevation by 1 story, so we only have 4 on Hornbeck Alley. I mean, you could make a motion that gives a conceptual approval with that condition, but you are having to use your mind's eye as to what that's actually going to look like. In a composition such as this, where it really is sort of functionally one building, it's probably best to go either all or none.
You could have a conceptual approval with a restudy of the whole back elevation.
Right.
Leaves it sort of wide open. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Meadows might not like that. But I'm just saying there it could go that way. One thing that I worry about, just thinking of chopping off that top floor, which I know that my applicant does not want to do, but proportionally, I don't think that's a good thing. I think
I didn't recognize those cornices were aligning, so.
I think proportionally, this looks great. This is what you want to see. We lost it now, but I think it's a very handsome elevation and it lines up. And not to argue, James, but if you were to take off a floor, then it becomes horizontal.
I did not think those cornices lined up. And so I've been told that they do.
Yeah, there you go.
They're right there.
Yeah.
You can see how it breaks out. I get the height part, but unfortunately, I think it looks very handsome.
That was the previous on top. This is our previous on the bottom.
I get that, yeah.
Further board comments or a motion?
Sorry, I'm kind of a single barrel shotgun when it comes to motions. Spent that shell.
Yeah, you already.
I'm since I can't get anyone else to do it, it's not my favorite form, but I'm going to do it. I would make a motion for conceptual approval with staff conditions and board comments.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Mr. Bello, how do you vote?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Brown?
No, not in favor.
Mr. Matters? Not in favor. Mr. White?
In favor.
Myself, in favor. Passes 3-2. Thank you to the applicant. Agenda item number 3, 74 President Street.
I'm doing good. This is my first race. But I'm really involved with the union peer thing because it's right there next to it. Explain to me why in the architectural design, the parking garages, parking not being in the architectural design.
They are.
This incorporates all of that.
Get up, it's like my seat down.
I know, I was gonna say, am I supposed to sit over here?
So they're on the plan.
Okay.
They are.
Okay, so whenever like this, y'all were only talking about really the height and the density of the building. I mean, the
Hard to
size.
drive, just gotta keep it interesting.
The size of the vehicle. Yeah, well, let me ask you some more things. How, I know y'all not ready for this is the thing. Why is the, I mean, I don't mind the thing, why is the, like, why is it on the facility that Charleston? Who was head spear the thing of making Charleston?
Yes, yeah, I couldn't hear your last name. I want to make sure that's
It's the context of the movie. If you're you know where they used to sell the vehicles, motorcycles, right there at South Market.
Good to see you too.
And that's the headline show that it would. Good, actually. We just that's all
Negotiating the contract with law construction.
just because it backs up the contracts, but
just over the summer, we just felt like we can't fit. Fall rolled around, we parted ways. We decided to just bring the project on board.
those decisions might have been
But anyways, we went back to Montee.
what we said.
So we just got the plans about 2 weeks ago. We'll post it out. So we're negotiating with them, the remainder of the contract. Long time.
Colors on the chart, so you can tell if it goes it's taking a step back so that people can see why this how order that and give us just like that, being able to visualize it. You need to understand that theoretically we can build a building that is X big, right, or Y big. And even though there's no specific details, this is a presentation. And see, that's not the replication, it's what's the use, what's the access.
Yeah, it's been a family. One time
If you're not an architect,
little kids are swim class right
if you're not, you don't think like that because that's your job.
There's a pool right in front of Burke High School.
You don't have this
So
perception that
I'm missing swim class.
We just had two things on the spot.
So I looked at this, actually somebody in our office says credit to Washington DC. They're currently doing their building and arch and everything on the transaction. It's exactly the same.
Oh, interesting.
So I sent it to everybody on the board. It's like, so I guess they like that detail.
Yeah, they have their, a lot of architects, they have their details.
I mean,
it's an old thing. One thing you gotta say,
Other buildings do that here.
So much.
Even though they check all the boxes they need. What I tell you, there's better responses. Charleston, there's huge.
Learning.
Service parking lots. Some of which county office building to warehouses. That's what I thought.
Doesn't make as much impact on.
They were very short on pocket it's Dallas. I think this board consider what I can tell you is from
But I mean,
you walk around.
naturally, it was like I was really interested in it. It was just like
Prefer that.
just joyous. It was. And then when you go,
From the bridge, we designed
not even just not another guy.
And I don't know if this word is just short from a 18 mile per As you go farther north on the peninsula, we can now visit where Charleston never
Short.
What's yours? 6
Right now, there's still cable going out one side.
you can see that. You can see it in there. You can see it. One of our problems is but everyone's got money in Charleston. I will tell you, really, it's part of this fight.
And now, I brought this because it happened. Corps of Engineers was a big somewhere. U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
It's all process. Of course, they got to defer.
Well, and it's a 10-year odds. And
Well, and what I would tell you is that I just we've all
Anything like that.
are
Talking about free
departments that
you decide that they dated for 4 years, they got married. So we've all, my children have all, they've been together forever. No kids.
I'll do that. I'm around the corner from you.
Highly successful.
That's your, I kind of guessed.
That's what's it, tell me.
I wasn't really sure. I'll be sure to stop by.
Yeah, right, we have the STR upstairs.
Which one is?
So I brought the coffee.
Okay, the coffee shop.
Oh, we're gonna say that all the
Yeah, we
time.
pay, I was gonna say our office.
They brought it home, and I decided
We appreciate
it's so freaky.
straight business.
Yeah.
So I'll stop by sometime and say a little bit on every conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, absolutely.
Just to do it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Hi. I'm still learning. I don't know what the protocol is. Upstairs,
No.
Okay,
All right, we got a working jar.
and that little intermission, we swapped some more conversations.
Yet again.
Yeah.
73
Alright, and this one we have Jay
Thank
White
Chris.
refusing. Okay.
No, you're good. I'm
74 president is requesting final approval for new construction of a 6-story, 94,000 square foot classroom and office building for USC College of Health Professions. This one is in Heights District 85 and 125 in the Old City District. So do we have contact slides? Alright, this is the location. This is close to President and it's on President, close to B Street. This is the property today. And this is the wall that was discussed last time and what we mentioned this time. Okay, we're ready.
Good afternoon, I'm Margie Longshore with SMHA, and here to present the final submittal application for NUSC's new College of Health Professions building at 74 President. So we were here in May for our preliminary approval meeting, and we've made several changes since then in response to the staff and board comments. I really think that the project has, the comments that we got have made a good impact on the project, so I think that y'all will be happy like we are with the result of those changes. We submitted both a presentation file, which is what we'll review today, and then a couple of very large files that contained our full construction documents package, since this is our final submittal. And then we will be making a separate submittal for the mock-up panel, which also is all. So can we go to the next slide, and the next slide. So this slide listed all of the prior comments that we received. Just to review what we were asked to restudy. First, the size of the engaged columns along the west elevation on the first floor to better relate to the floors above. The window rhythm along the west elevation on the 6th floor to better relate to the remainder of the building. The canopy at the first floor on the southwest corner was noted to feel disruptive to the massing. The penthouse level was still a point of concern due to the required size. On the south elevation, aligning the fascia to the parapet, the color of the soffit with the extended overhang over the 6th floor, and then there was a question about the brick wall and when that jog that we need to relocate was actually constructed. So this sheet included the cut sheets for the light fixtures that we reviewed at preliminary approval. We've not changed any of those selections. And then we also included the Sanborn map from 1902 showing that that brick wall had originally been straight along President Street. And then we can go to the next sheet, which is a demolition plan from the construction of the Basic Sciences building. The date on this is 1967, and so that wall jog was constructed at that point. So they opened up the current opening that's in place south of where our proposed building will be, and put a jog on each side. Go to the next slide. And this shows the new location. So there was a jog added on the north and south sides of that driveway. The one to the south, I think, was taken out during construction of the bioengineering building. We can go to the next slide. So this is the updated version of the west rendering. The version on top is the prior submittal, and on the bottom is the current submittal. So here you can see that the first floor engaged columns have been widened so that they relate more to the size of the brick above. And then you can also see that the extended overhang above the sixth floor, we've lightened the material at the underside so that it now matches the material of the fascia. So it's a little brighter and lighter looking, more consistent. And on the next slide, please. So this was the view from the south. Here you can see the removal of that canopy at the southwest corner of the first floor. At this point, there was no use for that. It was over a landscaped area. It had a function early in the project, and then it's one of those things that just stayed. So we really appreciated that comment from the board. And then we also here have aligned the extended overhang that comes along from the west with the parapet that continues off to the east. So those things are aligned now, and you can see that we've introduced a lighter color at the penthouse as well. Next slide. And so we've included the survey, and you can move through these Lawrence site plans. We've made no major changes to the site plans. Landscape plans, again, no major changes here either. Planting details, and then the architectural site plan as well. Next, we have floor plan sheets, and we have not made any significant changes to any of these, so I think we'll actually scroll through these. House and roof plan, and then next we should get to the elevations. So I have these set up so we have the comparison elevations from the prior submittal and the current submittal, and then after this we have our full construction documents elevation. So again, looking at the proposed versus the previous elevations, you can see the columns at the first floor level are wider. You can see the window revisions at the sixth floor level. Again, we appreciated that comment from the board. I think it's a stronger elevation having those aligned with the massing below. And then this view also shows the removal of the canopy at that southwest corner. And here we can see the lighter color that's proposed for the penthouse as well. I have brought with me some of the detailed drawings just so that y'all may be able to see this a little better than scrolling through all of the plans. But what I'll let Chris hold this one. What we are proposing, the board had suggested we look at a lighter color. We thought that was appropriate. We also are adding some reveal trims, some vertical trim to try to break down that overall massing. It's just hard to see on the elevation here. And then we have extended the parapet cap just to create another little shadow line around the top. We have studied, do we do more than this? Do we do more of an extension at that cap? But there's a fine line between drawing more attention to it and do we really want to draw more attention to it? How detailed does it want to be? Because it is, as many of the buildings at MUSD have. It's a mechanical penthouse that is critical to the function of the building. So that's where we are, and I did put just a picture of what that reveal trim would look like. So it would be a channel piece of metal trim just to match the metal panel color. Okay. Let's see, and I have talked with Tori about it. We had a fun conversation about it as well, and discussed the possibility of raising the parapet some, or raising that extended roof overhang. We studied that earlier in the process, and really we ran into structural attachment issues and support issues when we looked at doing that. So we can always do something like that, but it starts to be a trade-off of the complexity and the cost. And we feel like the rest of the building masses well, and we did not want to start growing that 6th floor level and make the buildings seem top heavy. So this is where we are. And we do have exterior material samples, and I've got the lighter metal color sample if y'all want to see that. So we can go to the next slide. This is just the CD version of that west elevation with all of our material notes. Next elevation. And then on the south elevation with the comparison from the previous submittal to the current proposal, again, we've aligned that roof edge above the 6th floor, as I mentioned, and you can see that the canopy of the southwest corner on the 1st floor has been removed. Next is the full view of the south elevation. Next, this is the east elevation. We really did not have any significant changes here other than the color of the penthouse. Next. On the north elevation, there were a couple of changes here to mention. You can see in the middle of the 2nd floor, there is a section of metal panel that was added. This is to provide a temporary wall closure where a proposed bridge will be coming, pedestrian bridge will be coming from the College of Medicine. So it's not intended to be permanent. If we find out that that bridge is not going to happen, or if it doesn't happen, that would be infilled with curtain wall to match the wall surface. But we did not want to continue the curtain wall there and have them have to disassemble that entire assembly. And then also, there are a few mechanical louvers that have been added. Those were required for air pressurization for the plant and things like that. So we located them here because we feel like once the College of Medicine project is built, this will have very limited visibility to the public. And after this, we have a full elevation. I believe after this, we get into a lot of project details, which I'd be happy to walk y'all through, but I don't know that we want to see all of them.
Save yourself the trouble.
Yes, and so if y'all have specific questions, we'd be happy to answer those. And with that, we are here to request final approval for the project, and if the board is willing to consider it, we would request that it be final approval without returning to staff for review of the details. I think staff has brought to y'all's attention that the building permit for this project will be issued through the state's Office of the State Engineer and not through the city of Charleston. We're working really hard with MUSC and the selected contractor right now to get through our review process, to get construction started, because they're looking at a hard deadline of getting students in this building on the academic calendar. Be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I do have a question, Mark, on this board that you showed here, just, and I guess I wasn't paying attention. So the enlarged parapet detail, at the bottom that you said you extended out, that's different from this. Where does this occur?
This is up here.
Oh,
So
okay,
this
that's
is
at the
just
top
at
of
the top of
penthouse.
the
Okay, thank
penthouse.
you.
Yes, this is, and
That's
typically
this.
this
I
is
got you.
our ACM
I got you.
detail.
Yep, okay, thank you. I missed that.
So questions, Mr. Matters?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I understand the need for the penthouse, right? But show me on the plans if you could, why is it as big as it is? I mean, the interior volume of that is driven by
The height of
air handlers, chillers, whatever.
And we have, the footprint's pretty small, we have very tall air handlers in there, and I don't think you were here for our preliminary meeting, we have a section through there, and it's a matter of them getting the ductwork out of those units, crossing across other units to get to the chases and things like that.
So, I mean, do you have that by any chance in this construction detailing?
I do not.
I didn't see it either.
Well, it probably is maybe in our building sections, but we may have turned some of that stuff off for clarity. But I have gone back to our mechanical engineer a lot of times, and he's telling me that he doesn't think things will fit.
Yeah, it just seems large, and I get what you're saying. I don't doubt that. It just seems.
Although I wasn't there, I was at the second meeting. At the first meeting, I think there was a condition to restudy that. At meeting number 2, they clarified that they did restudy it, but that volume is what they needed. So that was at meeting number 2.
Yeah.
We would lower it.
Absolutely. Well, but I mean, I guess, Mr. Chairman, lower it if we could. I mean, does that mean you restudy how you do your mechanical on the roof, to make it not as big? And, because it's like he's taking this direction from someone, right? And if you're having to layer things and this goes on top of this, then maybe there's a way to make it, and I'm not suggesting this would be better. The penthouse footprint could become somewhat bigger yet lower. And I don't know, it just seems almost out of balance, the size of it. And again, I want to make sure you hear me. I'm not questioning that that's what they're saying they need, but is there a way to redistribute the footprint so that you don't have to have the layering? I don't know the answer.
And we're kind of getting into, because I have comments to make, but I want to phrase it more of a question. Did you study, because I was thinking the same thing that James was talking about, can you spread it out and it comes lower, or is there a way where the majority is under a roof but it can be reduced by 4 feet if there's no bumpers on it, that's better or not. But did you study those kinds of options, or what can you describe what you studied? How about that?
It's been a while.
Because I was around for the first one and Steve was around, just the middle review.
Yeah, y'all were here for the middle.
Oh, we were in the middle? Okay.
I was here for the first one, not the second. Okay, fine.
We can take a look at the penthouse plan. If you go back, Lawrence, to the floor plans, it would be one of the last ones. It's hard to see, but we do have, these are footprints of the very large units. I believe this is another one, and this is another one. And the challenge is getting ductwork out of here, having walk space for people to actually access all of this, and getting ductwork into a chase here and a chase here. For the entire building, we are squeezed everywhere. So, starting with the first floor is tucked in from the upper floors because we've been trying at every opportunity to gain more space in the building. We had, I believe that earlier in the project, it may have been when we came for conceptual, I think we did have a slightly larger footprint up here, but in the interest of trying to minimize the height and get it away from President Street, we've pulled it in because I think that the view, we've got a couple of the renderings here just for reference. If you're standing on President Street, across the street, you don't see the penthouse. And so we were trying to tighten it up in that way to to minimize it kind of hanging over the street elevation.
I have a question for Tori. The applicant's been consistent all along about these restraints with mechanical.
So, in my perspective, yes, that is true, and what some of the things y'all got into in the last meeting that a lot of you were here for was, if it's gotta be that big, then what do we do with it now? And y'all talked about, the color study, and you talked about, do you integrate it more with the architect, or do you simplify it more?
I mean, like a parapet wall.
But that was kind of a new comment that that I have in my comments that Margie's addressed, because we spoke this afternoon at the meeting, and
One last question here. Not a mechanical, can't tell you there's hate meetings, I'm always pushing up. So I'm looking at that, so those dash boxes, so is that mechanical equipment? Right, and so there's like 10 feet to the right of that, that's just walking around space? Inside there, just.
Yes, but it also, we have, it is walking around space, but this is where our stairs are.
I understand the stairs drive it, but everything shifted to the plant right. I guess you've got stairs are better.
Yeah, I mean, we've got other units here, so there are clearances required around all of these. And we have some space for them to work up there if they have to disassemble one of these units. We've got like a section of wall that will be framed separately so they can take that wall out if they have to hoist a unit up there.
So Marge, I mean, at least for me, I'm all about giving appropriate space to maintenance equipment. I get that. So I'm not suggesting that you don't do that, but is there just a different way to configure it to give you the maintenance you need, but by spreading it out a little more?
To enlarge the penthouse?
Yeah, and make it shorter. And I'm not suggesting that that's going to end up being better.
Yeah.
So I don't know, because we don't know what that would look like, but.
I'm Chris Hoffman. I would say that, James, the issue is not this direction, it's the limitation of the height and size of these units. So even if we spread them, that doesn't change. And we went back after preliminary to our mechanical guys and like, if we can get a foot out of this thing, we need to get it out of there. And they came back and said, we are shoehorned in here. So I mean, I feel like we've tried our best to figure out how to minimize this thing. And thinking about it in a three-dimensional aspect.
And the issue, like Chris was saying, is the height, and we have to get the ductwork over to here without crossing the pathway. And we can't, overhead's the only way we can get it. So I think that even if we cut it out, that doesn't give us another path to get that ductwork to the chases.
I don't know that I've never been involved in a meeting where we're talking about something like this. Well, but I'm just going to ask one more, just going to extend it with one more question. You talk about the vertical, and that equipment can't be rotated and put horizontal, so that you're in and out this.
The equipment is horizontal, it's just tall equipment, and the ductwork has to come out at the top of it.
Believe me, we asked the same question.
Got it. Further board questions at this time? Hear none. Thank you to the applicant. Any member of the public here to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, city staff comments or recommendations?
okay, I want to clarify one thing, was that the penthouse sort of blew up between conceptual and preliminary. So I don't think it was, when we looked at height, scale, mass in the first one, that it was, that the needs were known related to the size of the equipment. Okay. All right. A little bit of analysis. The applicant has largely addressed comments and conditions from the last review. Two of the items that the board spent more time on are the penthouse because of its size and the ground floor canopy at the southwest corner, which has now been eliminated. While the ground floor canopy gave a sense of entry location to the public right away, there's actually no entry to the building in this corner. And then at the north elevation, we've addressed this, a solid portion of corrugated metal panel is proposed at the second level. This material is not indicated in the building. However, it is a temporary condition to accommodate the bridge, which will connect to the College of Medicine at 35 B Street. And then the condition for approval is the penthouse size remains the same. And while a color change and detailing have been applied, it simply is not enough to reduce the visual impact of this large penthouse. Study the composition of the facades to include a raised parapet at the roof in order to reduce the exposed height of the penthouse, which currently is out of proportion with the building. And our recommendation is deferral with board and staff condition.
Thank you, Tori. Would the applicant care to respond?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we've looked internally at raising the parapets to reduce the visual height of the penthouse. That creates a lot of challenges for us structurally. So I think that we've studied this a good bit, and I appreciate this time.
I would add to it, I think, fortunately, I think adding thickness to that thin line that we have there, I think we're starting to get disproportionately not aesthetically as successful as it is right now.
So I'll start. If the, if the penthouse footprint can't change and height can't change, then what do we do to the outside of it to make it more acceptable? So, if we're not, if you can't do anything about the size of it, you can't do anything about the size of it. Then what do we do so it becomes more
Aesthetic.
And that was the bulk of the discussion at the previous meeting. And so, in fairness to the applicant, we effectively accepted the form of it, I believe, at the last meeting. But we asked them to restudy the skin to make it better without being prescriptive about what that is.
Well, I was gonna ask, Tori, could you, and it's written down here, but I'm a lot of stuff to read. When it was approved preliminary, restudy or is it board staff comments? Because I don't remember it as well. I don't know that we said, that was really the main thing. The bottom, y'all addressed the first floor. I think the other pages are great. But I don't remember, did we say restudy the top? And if they came back and it's not restudied, but they've got their reasons, is that it, or was it?
So it was it was board and staff comments, and the only staff comments related to the jog and the canopy at the top of that the floor, and also the two-tone color palette was problematic for staff. And then board discussion, I will say, I know where it is. We talked about the canopy at the top, and then concern of size of visible penthouse. More design might draw attention to it, suggests a lighter color. Another board member said that the penthouse at 20 feet tall is very visible, and it's almost like another level of the building. You should be treated with similar care as that facade. So it wasn't a comment in the motion, it was just all the comments were rolled into that motion. And another one, study the top penthouse, including a color. It might be as simple as adding reveals. Another one, will take more than color at the mechanical penthouse. It's still a box, so much detail in the building that it's not at the top. Those are the things.
Thank you.
And I remember the flavor of the conversation being that we did, that, you gotta be really careful about adding a bunch of architectural detail to this thing. And the notion, or what the board was pushing was, if a color palette revision will make this thing blend in or disappear, that's probably the best solution. That's what I would say the gist of it was. Because there's not a lot of prescriptive description about what to hang on it to make it less, right? It's all about making it less impactful. And I think we have an applicant who's described, because of site problems and some very practical physical limitations, a good reason why they can't do what we asked them to do.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna ask Steve, Eddie, is it 20 feet tall?
Seems tall.
It is, I mean, sometimes when you're in these situations, you actually sink the mechanical down into the building. Of course, that occupies floor space, which I'm sure would create a serious challenge with their program. So understanding why they didn't do it, but that's what you do sometimes when you have these conditions. And I just assume this type of building just has a complex HVAC system.
This is one of those examples that I was talking about earlier, where you go, okay, well, let's go another floor. Right. And recess that down
Well,
into.
sometimes you don't see the mechanical, it's just an extension, it's another floor, and there's no mechanical.
Right.
We didn't bring that up last time.
But I do think procedurally, we didn't push back on the volume at the last meeting. So I think it may be unfair at this point to push on that. We asked them to study the facade of the mechanical, which most people would say, really spend time on the mechanical, but if you have a great looking building, but then a not so great mechanical penthouse, it can be unfortunate. That's why we're discussing it. It does, when you look at the renderings, it has improved just simply by changing the color and adding the joints, I think will help too. You know, one thought I had was actually including part of that in the mock-up panel, which we don't often do for buildings, but you know, that's something that I think would be helpful because sometimes joints in metal panels can be so minimal you don't see them. Sometimes they're more pronounced. And I think it would be better if they were visible just to break up what would be a box.
It's something, right?
Yeah. We also talked about the cantilever and that it you know, is kind of thick. And yeah, I don't know if that, instead of sloping down, if it actually tapered up, it would help. It could start to thin up that blade, but also minimize the visibility of the mechanical screen. It's just, you know, without trying to design it, it may help. But I do want to point out that I think the rest of the building, I think, is at a great spot for final approval in terms of the design and the detailing. So we're clearly focusing on one piece, but it should go noted that I think that, you know, the detailing is there and it's certainly compatible with this district.
Further board comments or a motion?
It is interesting that we have this much comment about this in-house, yeah.
That's right. I think we have to have some proportionality in light of the project we just approved. So I'm going to make a motion for approval incorporating board and staff comments.
And with details to staff.
With details to staff. Thank you for accepting friendly amendment to my motion. So motion for approval, incorporating board staff comments, details to staff.
I'll second that.
Mr. Bella seconds, so it's in proper order. We'll go down the roll. Mr. Brown?
Not in favor.
Mr. Metters?
Not in favor.
Mr. Ramos?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Bella? Yea in favor. And myself, yea in favor. Thank you to the applicant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Steve, are you sticking around? Steve, are you sticking around?
I'm sticking around.
Okay. You want to take my spot? And I'll just leave.
Sure.
Yeah. I got a dinner reservation. There it is.
Thank you very much. Thank
They got to be nonetheless. There you go.
Enjoyed your baseball story.
You like that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like to bring in some bullshit like that sometimes. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Good to see you, Steve.
James.
Good to see you. See you.
See y'all. City staff. Godspeed.
They did a really nice job.
And Steve, I have to apologize. I had a client for many, many years. He's now passed who was ringless hard days. So you were always
I know.
Oh, gotcha.
between Ramos and Ramos. Yeah. So when I do that,
I say
notice.
however people say Ramos. Don't worry about it.
Okay. It's hard for me to go with the client.
Thank y'all.
Hey, thank you too.
You're not crazy. I think that's a much bigger conversation. And that's a conversation I would love to not have as a city. No, I would get together in a workshop or whatever, but I see, I don't notice it there. I see it in other places. And there's actually an article I'll forward you about that. It's excellent. About design in general and a concept called smoothness that is starting to make everything strange.
So, yeah, I sent out that email about the building in Washington.
I would have responded to it, but I didn't want to be in a FOIA request.
Well, fair enough. Maybe I should have thought that through.
When I made my comment, I was going to get from you here now because I need to stand by it. When we approve a project as massive as the one just approved, I think we have to actually more better yet, and we can't. We're not Nostradamus. We can't give a future aspect but it's worth saying whether this board should have a written checklist when this board is meeting and looking at projects to say, have we thought about X, Y, and Z? Because I do think proceeding with some favor we can do it. I just think it leaves bad taste in the mouth to say, okay, you did A, B, and C, but now we've thought about the L, M, N, and an O, and we're really sorry we didn't think about it the first time. Please fix it. And so conceptually getting our minds around it, I think is helpful. One of the things that you can do to fix that, because it affected the tenor of our conversation today, was that 3D model. That 3D model answered a lot of questions. So whether it's that or a 3D perspective rendering in the slide, it answers a lot of questions.
Well, that model was, as models go, pretty economical.
It was. How much would you say that was?
In terms of material, $100.
Yeah, in terms of talking about.
You mean that whole model? No, it'd be more than $100.
In terms of material.
That was just a very easy, I agree with your assessment. It's not a hard model. What they did, and it was
Probably 25 to 30 hours of labor. And, filament and the foam core. I mean, once you made the investment in the tools.
Switch the wrong seat that we did.
You use it.
Class you did.
That's all.
I'm going to charge
So I don't know.
Okay, that gives me an idea. But think about what in terms of what they achieved in terms of the board understanding. Oh, I'm almost saying that if it's a project of that magnitude, why would we not have it first?
Well, that's I mean, that's our, I mean, that's the reason that we are here. Invest in the tools and comes in interns and semester.
That's what they do. Okay. I think we certainly have a quorum. Ready to proceed with agenda item number 4/5, 657 King Street.
Okay, if you are noticing to the left, we have a different board composition to accommodate absence. All right, 657 King Street is requesting conceptual approval for a new 4- and 5-story mixed-use building to include 18 accommodations units over ground floor retail and service parking. This one is not particularly tied to any neighborhood association. Its type district is 4 and 6, and it's in the old and historic district. What context do we have? This is the location. That is Lime Street to the south and the Second McClark Parkway to the north. And this is the property today. They're looking west. And this is from the parkway. This is from King with the property on your right. And looking north on King with the property on your left.
Good evening, my name is Nicholas Glitza, I'm with fellow Harris Architects. So just saw some context photos. The site there is highlighted in red on King, right next to the overpass. Just kind of saw we're right across the street from Barca, there on the corner of Line and King. Context is empty lot right south of the Courier diagonal to the site. Just context images from Online Street and across the street. So one of the things we look at when we're looking at sites, as we always do, is look at context and the patterning of the area. And so this is the King Street project, and so one of the things we did was kind of look down King Street, next slide, and kind of look at the local area to see, again, what's there, and how what we're doing is going to fit. It's an interesting area of King because from Spring Street south, there's a predefined edge to what King Street is. And then just north of Spring, you hit the U-Haul, the Coastal Courier, the old self-storage that's all under redevelopment, a lot of vacant properties. And so there's this kind of degradation of what that urban edge is. The buildings are kind of set back off the road. I know we're not really supposed to talk about things that aren't there yet, but we wanted to highlight some of the stuff that's kind of been through the VAR and in the approval processes. So just south of us, just for context, would be the scale of the Treasure Square development and heights there. There's a lot of 5 to 7 story buildings coming along King on that west side, and then our property, like Tori said, is 6 and 4. But owner Matthews here, we preemptively took the site because we thought it would be better to kind of flatten it out. So we are in the process of rezoning it from 6 stories to 5 stories with the 25-foot offset from King. So it'll still be 4 stories along King Street, but we're lowering it to 5 stories. For a number of reasons. I think number one, proportionally, it makes it a better building, than to have a 2-story kind of offset, and it's a little more friendly to the adjacent context, especially when you look at kind of how the development further south of us is stepping down towards Line Street. Like I said a second ago, one of the things we looked at was kind of the patterning of King Street and looking at the kind of scale and rhythm along King and how that kind of erodes again on that west edge, but how our building would become one piece and the other developments just south of us to kind of help restore some of that edge. So we looked at some of the King Street buildings a little further south of us, and again, it's a reflection of a lot of VAR principles. Tall vertical proportions. You see it in 3-ish bays with the storefront on the ground floor, some kind of cornice element. There are also a couple places where we have longer buildings along King that use unifying elements, even though there's some maybe disparity in the window types and sizes, the layout, even material changes. That started to try to break down a longer elevation into smaller pieces without doing anything, gymnastics on the side. The other thing we looked at were the kind of textures along King. So we looked at some of the brick detailing that existed, the houndstooth, the stack brick, next slide. Again, some of the cornice lines and spatial details. Kind of, again, look at how some of that was treated further south. Next slide. And of course, we looked at the storefronts, just kind of the rhythm and language, the different ways they touch the ground, the scale of the framing, and the different entry treatments. Next slide. And the last thing was just kind of looking at the elements and entrance elements. Next slide. So this is the site plan. You can see the overpass just to the north of us. Line streets to the south. We have one property that is adjacent to ours that actually encroaches over the property line to our south elevation. We're right on the DOT right away to the north, and the site has currently 2 curb cuts on the property. And so in order to make sure we're not impacting the Line Street neighborhoods, all of our vehicular circulation comes in and back out on being kind of one-way circulation, in at the top, out at the bottom. All of our parking is surface parking. It's all accounted for on site, and then we have retail and business and accommodations use our meeting spaces there on the ground floor. So all of our ground floor storefronts front that space. Next slide. All the utility stuff is accounted for kind of in the parking area. So everything that fronts King, with the exception of the garage egress and egress, service public application. Next slide. So the second through third floors, five units per floor. It's a mixture of 2-bedroom and 4-bedroom units. We've kind of staggered the building a little bit to give us the most opportunity for windows and bedrooms, that kind of thing. You'll see in the plan on the north and south edges that where the vehicle entrance exits are, that area is set back a little bit to allow the brick massing in the center to read a little stronger. Next slide. At the 4th level, step back or down, the elevation adjacent to the building to the south is on King. So you can see that south wing there is pulled back off the edge, just to get that line. And at the 5th floor, you can see where the 25-foot setback is. So that's where our 5th floor starts, but in essence, we've set the rest of the 5th floor even further back from that, just as a product of form and trying to reduce that presence or visibility along the street. Next slide. Roof plan, next slide. So looking at kind of inspiration images, wanted to do a building that was contextual to King Street, wanted to do a masonry building, wanted to do it in a little bit of a contemporary way. So we're looking at a little bit of a darker brick and building that would use kind of layering in the facade. Next slide. And also looking materially like the contrast between brick and wood, more natural looks. Next slide. This is the east elevation on King Street. Again, the vehicle entrance exit is on the left and right. Just sheer nature of vehicular traffic, the scale at the ground level is going to be different. So the 2 ends are just responding differently, just to allow that to be a little separate, and that gives the opportunity to take the center portion and divide it into 4 more regular bays that respond more to the King Street portion. We have a series of bays that have primary columns that define those edges, secondary pilasters inside of that, just to give it that kind of tripartite rhythm. The 3 bays in the middle, again, all of this is to try to take what's a very long elevation and break it down into a more vertical proportion. And so there's a little bit of a shift for the 3 bays on the left, where we have the cornice roof. That's a little bit of a nod to more traditional use of cornices. Helps define those 3 central bays, which sets up the kind of main entrance for the units, for the residential units. With the next bay being kind of similar to what, say, Bluestein's did, where there's material continuity, there's proportional continuity in the glazing, there's continuity with the storefront at the ground level, just color change. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same rhythm, just a little different language to help focus those. Next slide. You can see that a little bit better in this slide, where the bay on the left is flanking the bay in the middle. Details are very similar, very proportions of the storefront at the bottom. Where we've got our residential entrance, the fenestration changes a little bit. The horizontal at the 4th floor interrupts the vertical pilasters to essentially bring that down to a 3-story kind of visual massing with a little more detail at the 2nd floor or 3rd floor span. And that fenestration change carries all the way to the ground. Again, just to signify it's a little bit different, it's where the signage is. That entrance for the residents is pushed back deeper than the rest of the commercial storefronts, and just to give it a little bit of a different feel as you're walking down the street. Next slide. So again, I like the idea of using a darker kind of charcoal brick for this building, and I think where there's going to be a lot of richness in the brick detailing that you see, whether it's in the spandrel panels or at the 4th floor where you see some of the dental detailing. There's some play in the depth of where those planes are, so you can see the 4th floor there in the middle where it's corbelled out to catch that heavier kind of beam element. Excuse me. And this is the King Street side. This is where you're going to really see this building as pedestrian. So I think some of that texture and richness, even though it's brick, very simple. And this is just kind of that transition in the 4th bay. When you see that primary column become the kind of division of the two. The sill lines align, and the detailing just transitions a little bit, where the dental detailing on the left side becomes a reveal on the right side. So the lines continue, but just next slide. Streetscape elevations. You can see the overpass is kind of hitting us. Next slide. Same elevations we're just looking at. Next slide. Building section looking north, just showing how the building steps down towards King. Again, it's just to kind of show you how close we are to that overpass, and show you that setback on the 5th floor. Next slide. So like we were saying earlier, it's kind of a unique place and experience for the King Street side, where you're coming in under the underpass. You don't really get to see the building until you're under the bridge. Next slide. And I think this is a pretty good shot of how we're taking those bays, treating them very similarly in the kind of pattern of the elevation, but doing it in a way that keeps it from feeling like a very monotonous rhythm of a long building. It feels very much like separate storefronts that all kind of share the same language with some subtle difference. Next slide. This is a north elevation against the overpass. Next slide. So again, you will see this side of the building coming up the overpass, and like the front, where we're trying to break down the overall kind of scale of the building. there is some push and pull in the plans, some kind of gaps that are created that let this stucco corner kind of read as a independent, not independent, but a smaller scale piece of the building. And we did that because we didn't want it to feel so heavy, like all brick or all stucco or one material. We feel like that would have been a little much. And the way it's broken up now with the different materials, I think goes back to creating those kind of narrower, taller vertical portions. Next slide. This is the west elevation looking at the back of the property. Next slide. So you can see that there how the stucco is kind of bookending the brick mask, screening the garage elements at the bottom, and continuing some of that brick detailing, cornice and fifth floor. The windows are a little bit smaller on the fifth floor, which is typically Charleston thing to do. So their window types are generally the same, just a little bit smaller. And this is the south elevation, looking north. Next slide. This is the corner of Line and King. So you can see the front stucco portion where the garage exit is where we step the building down, which allows us to turn the glass on that corner. I think it lets that brick mass read a lot stronger. And the fifth floor, again, just lighter stucco mass, step back. Probably, I think it's 30 or 40 feet long. The setback. Next slide. Just one more kind of shot look at this floor plan along. Next slide.
Thank you very much. Any members of the public? Oh,
sorry. One quick thing. One of the things that came up a lot when we were meeting with people was the color of the stucco. So we did do a couple studies in between then and now just to look at what if the stucco boxes were shades darker, just to see how that would read the rest of the building. So we have those if anybody would be interested in seeing them.
thank you. Members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda item. Ms. Minigan.
Thank you, Erin Minigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. First, we would like to thank the applicant for meeting with us about this project. Generally, we feel the building presents a nice face to King Street that complements the rhythm of the streetscape and handles the length of the frontage very well. We also really appreciate the depth of brick detailing on the primary facade. Revisions to the design since the previous submittal have helped address our concerns about the building's impact on the adjacent historic context. In particular, modifications to reduce the height and add fenestration to the south side of the building presents major improvements. However, we do feel a few areas need continued study. First, because of the building's location directly next to the highway and underpass, it will be highly visible from these travel routes. There are areas of blank wall space with flat stucco finishes that we are concerned will provide unattractive views of the building, including at the front northeast corner, seen traveling south down King Street on page 831, and the northwest corner as viewed from the highway on page 833. These are very prominent locations that should be studied with a higher quality finish and greater articulation and depth. Also, the top of the building feels quite flat and could use enhanced dimension and detail to help enliven it, especially since it's on the King Street corridor, which has a strong tradition of intricate, distinct roof forms. Finally, we do question the darkness of the brick. The black brick shown in the precedent photos would be out of character with the historic setting. A sample will be helpful to understand the exact color being proposed, but we would caution against an overly dark color given the context.
Ms. Minigan. Further members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda item. Seeing none, city staff comments.
A little bit of context. The site is at the far northern end of Upper King Street, south of Sutton Park Parkway, and along with 677 King Street, to help establish the tone of the more urban and commercial environment while being deferential to its immediate smaller neighbors to the south and west. A three-story building has received BAR approval for the corner of King and Line Streets. If constructed, this will screen much of the view to the proposed from the King and Line Street intersection. The distance to the neighboring structures at the west mitigates the building's visual impact on them. The building's most impacted neighbors from a massing standpoint are 653 King Street because of the proximity to the proposed, and the two-story structures on Line Street because of the height of the proposed adjacent to them. The east elevation is composed of several bays, each with a slight difference from neighboring bays, but with an overall mostly cohesiveness. A hierarchy is set for these changes, utilizing material changes, cornices, awning placement, brick detailing, and a window grade change and signage. The storefronts at the center section of the King Street elevation blend harmoniously with the normal patterns along King Street. Right, some conditions for approval. Number one, provide additional perspectives from Line Street and from the September Clark Parkway depicting the proposed building with the two-story structures on Line Street. It would be best to omit vegetation on these. Dimensions to adjacent structures will also help to better understand the impact on them. Lowering the 5-story southwest portion, similar to the lowered southeast portion, would help alleviate concerns with the proposed looming over these historic lower structures. Two, while the King Street elevation is successful, the lighter colored exterior bays could take more cues from the brick bays. This comment could be applied overall to the building. There is consistency in how the brick masses are treated and how the stucco masses are treated individually. However, there could be more cohesiveness or alignment in their treatment studied to address. Alternatively, the brick masses could be more dominant and the lighter stucco portions could be secondary studied to address. Perhaps this might address any perceived competition between them. 4, provide more width and or depth at the recess at the west elevation as proposed. It is not enough to mitigate the tension that develops from the adjacent cornices. 5, continue to study the inspiration images provided for the brick detailing as those are developed. And 6, continue to study the color palette. This is something I'm not surprised to discuss. While this would be reviewed in a later submittal, it has already been considered and discussed with the applicant because it relates to the harmony of the project parts. So I find that a contrast between the light and dark should be tipped out. And then we're recommending deferral for a full understanding of how the massing relates to the adjacent historic structures.
Thank you, Tori. Any response for that?
Gonna respond, so, Andy Bello with Bello Garris. So just wanna go through respond to a couple of things the Preservation Society said. First, for clarification, we don't want black brick, we totally agree with that. We just don't want it to be the sort of typical traditional red brick. We want this to be a little more distinctive. That's obviously something we need to work on. Conceptual level, we just wanted to get some insight from the board on that. So colors are not something that really we should decide at this stage. Another comment, could you go to the front elevation, Lawrence? One of the comments the Preservation Society had, and we talked about this a little bit, was a little more elaborate, cornice or something. One of the challenges we're trying to do here is create interest but not have tradition. And so what we've come up with is a lot of detailing and a richness, and definitely need to develop more without, resorting to impediments and things that you might see that we think would be out of character. I do think this move of stepping this down, which was a big deal, kind of gives you now this sort of rhythm, which to me is very easy. It's not a big flat building. And then thinking about some city comments we had, over this with them. So a big change that we made was this stepping this down. There's a lot of work. This is a King Street building. We spend most of our time thinking about King Street. This is how the building's going to be experienced. It's going to be experienced not from the back, which nobody can get to except for people who live there, but from King Street, walking down the street, riding down the street, even on the highway. I'll get that in a minute, but this is King Street. So we help from the next presentation, studied how King Street buildings work, proportions. So I think our thought is that conceptually height scale and that, this is very important how we approach it. As Nick said, the site was originally 6 stories in the back, and 4 on the front. So we changed that to even it out so we would have a better mass. And so if we disagree, of course, with further reduction of the back that you have an experience of the right of way, we don't think that's appropriate. We put the height where we think that that wasn't an impact. Street. Again, this is a 5-story building that you can see. That's very, I think most of the other comments from the staff are mostly preliminary level, color change, depth. Obviously, we won't say that those are not high skill. Last thing, we did study a lot. One of the comments we heard from both staff and straight studies, how's it going to look when you're on the highway? And so we changed that a good bit. Definitely want to keep developing it, but impact on the public right away, we feel like it's still a very strong design. Again, we're asking for high skill mass. I think one of the dangers that we all have, we show a lot of stuff in conceptual, give a lot of comments that might not be.
Well, so let me ask you a question. Why do you show it all?
Excited to think about it.
But I mean, that opens the door. And I mean, I ask that frequently because if it was height, scale, and mass in a box, that's what we'd be dealing with. And so you're right. I agree with what you're saying. But
It's height, scale, and mass and general architectural direction.
To Andy's point, I think. Go ahead.
Well, I agree, and it is that danger. I was joking around. We used to show elevation. That's all I know how to draw, right? But part of it is, I think, the challenge for the board. We go further because we want to get more comments, but we don't want those comments to hurt us, right? So we don't. What I mean is, you don't want a comment at this preliminary level. I don't like the brick detailing on that window when you're showing something conceptual. We don't want that to affect your conceptual approval. It doesn't hurt to get the comments. Great, that helps us next time. We don't want to be penalized at the stage we're at for something that might happen. That makes sense. So that's the response.
Very good. That will already come to some board discussion. Now we'll have full-on board discussion. I'll jump right in. I think the King Street facade on this building is very successful. I love the height, scale, and mass. I love the obvious deference and attention to exemplars that the applicant brought before us. And I would agree with the applicant that some of the concerns I would otherwise vocalize would be things that I would look at preliminary on this King Street facade in terms of some of the detailing, fenestration, et cetera. But I do have to allude to those comments to save you working down the road. Going to general architectural direction, I would say that I agree with the comment that the expressway is what it is. I personally think it's okay to be more ambitious with that facade, but again, height, scale, and mass, fine. Maybe on the architectural direction, let's be a little more ambitious because unfortunately, and this shouldn't be held against the applicant, I've heard many other applicants reason their way through saying, well, it's on the crosstown, or you're only going to see it from the crosstown, or you're only going to see it from I-26. I would say in terms of actual traffic, not pedestrian traffic, but vehicles passing it, you're going to have more of those on I-26 and the expressway than you are on King Street, particularly at this location. So I think it's okay to maybe be more ambitious on that facade, but that's not hanging me up on the height, scale, mass, or general architectural direction. I think it's a very thoughtful project, but I would say that I have lots of questions for preliminary that might conform is too strong a word, but rely more heavily on the exemplars that you provided. Other board comments?
I agree with that.
So could we go back in the, and Nick, you might tell us what it says exactly, but the precedent.
Real early, like,
Okay. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Going on. There you go. That one and then page 4.
I mean, they're great buildings, right? So my first comment is that there are, Bello Garris buildings that have these layered areas, and a lot of them look similar. And it's like you could go down the street and pick out your building because it's great, but it's layered and it follows that kind of similar pattern project to project. And I'm pointing these out because they're very similar. And if you go back and you look at time frames in the past, you will see the same thing happening. On King Street, you'll see virtually the same thing. And we're sitting here saying, yes, some of my favorite buildings. So you're following a pattern. Sometimes I don't like that pattern gets followed, but it is a consistent pattern that that same rhythm is exhibited here. Again, some of this is preliminary, but it's on there. The difference in the lights on the east side, I kind of like it, the way it helps define the three buildings. There is a lot going on, and depending on the brick color, it's going to be accented more or less. Contrast in the materials is significant and will be interesting. The exterior is driven some by the interior so that you can get the windows in the bedrooms and stuff like that. But I think that's successfully done, and you're able to get more bedrooms. And then sheet A26. This could minimally affect height, scale, and mass, but how between this one and A34, exactly how all of these transfer in. This looks like it might be, a little proud of that, and I think if you go to A34, so I'm skipping it now, but again, for preliminary, that height, scale, mass is just finally general architectural direction. I'm so on that part for that elevation. And then the last one's A36. I wrote the wrong number down again, but where all of those, the three buildings kind of come together, and you've got those corbels that are coming out, it seems like some of them are actually proud of the adjacent building, and I don't really see how that works exactly, but that's it.
You're good, Mr.
Thank you.
Further board comment?
If you could go back to the King Street elevation. I think everybody is comfortable with the height, scale, and mass. I think the general architectural direction. I agree with some of the things James has just said. I think the brick areas are very handsome, and you guys have done some really handsome brick buildings. And then when I look at the stucco part, it's not as handsome. And so, I kind of want more of the brick on King Street, and all of the King Street presents you looked, they pretty much, I think, had the same body material across the building. And there's a dozen examples of horizontal buildings, on King Street, although vertical is more prominent. And so I think that in this case, that is part of the architectural direction, the facade treatment. And it's my opinion that it would be improved if that brick just continued, but still having the differentiation that you're doing on that facade. So that's kind of my thought on King Street. Even the cornice, I understand you've kind of focused it on those three bays, but I just think the building as a whole would be stronger if it was just continuous. If you go to sheet 34. Yeah, so the elevated highway we've talked about, we think of it as a secondary thing, but it is really prominent. And I understand the desire to break it up the mass, but I don't know, I think a more logical and harmonious facade might be better. So like your building kind of has a front wing on King and then kind of a back wing. And so transitioning materials at those major kind of hyphens seems more logical than what I'm seeing. Is it seems a little more random. So I'm kind of torn on the architectural direction, but I certainly believe it will get there based off of the quality of particularly the brick portions of the building.
Further board comments? Good? Okay. At this point, we've got a couple bodies of thought, but can I entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion for approval of height, scale, and mass and general architectural direction with the conditions that the applicant restudy some of the facade treatment to be a little more harmonious or a little more unity.
So, Mr. Ramos, your motion, if I understand it correctly, is for conceptual approval of height, scale, mass, and general architectural direction with request for restudy that incorporates the board's comments. And for more, and restudy more harmonious elevations.
That's correct.
Is there a second?
And board staff comments.
And board staff.
And board staff comments.
The motion's in proper order. Mr. White, how do you vote on the motion?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Ramos, your motion.
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Anderson, and myself, yeah, in favor. Thanks to the applicant.
One of their comments was the lower back, that included in. I was, that's what I heard from the board.
Yeah, but it's a restudy though, I mean, so if you choose not to.
Restudy.
That's really clear.
Bring it back. We'll see how you did.
Thank you. I think. No, we're good. I mean.
I thought that was amazingly clear.
I don't think we have an issue with the massing.
Yeah, I think what you said, is more unified.
So
we were pretty.
Sure.
So what we're doing is maybe it's not really. So what is what we're going to
I think so.
1.2 Main Street.
Like you look so much more put together than just a nice dark shirt and coat. And look at this.
You don't have shorts on.
what